Welcome back to AM Live, and what we're discussing this morning is matters innovation. And with me in studio, I'm joined by two gentlemen. One I've hosted before, the other I'm happy to have been introduced to this morning. We are joined by Professor Collins Odote. And you know, I was just Googling, and I saw that the University of Nairobi posted that Associate Dean Professor Collins Odote has been appointed to the board of the Kenya National Innovation Agency, Kenya, for a period of 3 years, effective June 10th, 2022. So today he's here in his capacity as board member Kenya, and he's in the very good company of the CEO, and that is Tony Omwansa. Good to make your acquaintance this morning, gentlemen. As I was doing my Googling, I came across a tweet, and I saw that the Secretary General of the Commonwealth was speaking as far as the Kenya Innovation Week is concerned. But first of all, let me not get ahead of myself. Let's first start with the Innovation Week and what it is all about. It was officially launched yesterday, continues today, all the way through to the 8th, which is tomorrow, Thursday. So tell us a little bit about the purposes. This is an event which is held annually. It's being held at the Sarit Center, as I understand it. So, Bwana CEO, perhaps you can explain to those of us who may not have seen the banners, because driving around I have seen the banners. You could tell us what the Innovation Week is all about.
Okay, thank you very much. As an innovation agency, we are tasked with the mandate of developing the national system for innovation. That includes issues of policy, funding, tracking, building interlinkages between institutions, and so forth. So, you know, innovation is not a one-sector issue. It's cross-ministerial, it's multidisciplinary in nature, and sometimes it's a little bit amorphous, like you can't touch it, right? Mm-hmm. It could be processes, it could be products, it could be people. So on an annual basis, we try to congregate different people from government, from private sector. We deal with startups, we deal with academia who are trying to commercialize their research outputs, and let's engage, all right? And then let's also showcase the progress we've made over the last 1 year. So this year we've got over 100 exhibitors in Sarit Center, and we've got 3,000 plus delegates who have signed up at different tracks. Now, some of the tracks we're looking at is skills, for example, for innovation, all right? So we've got areas around how do you build innovative mindsets. We've got issues of commercialization. So researchers are keen on how do you create commercial value out of the research outputs that you have. We've got issues of technology, which is an enabling means. So we've got a summit today specifically on technology and digital transformation. We've got issues of startups. They need funding, they need partners, they need businesses, they need clients, and so forth. And we started off even with a pre-event on student-led innovations. You know, you have to build a pipeline and encourage students to be part of that process. We also have something on public sector innovations, because the services that government gives to people needs to be as streamlined and easy to access as possible. And at the end of the day, everyone is an innovator. And many people always think that this is not my thing, you know? And we're here to try and help people and understand that as long as you can create value, you can solve a particular challenge and create new possibilities, you're an innovator. So even you're an innovator.
All right, so this is about problem solving.
Exactly.
All right, so what does Kenya do the rest of the year when they're not hosting the Innovation Week?
Thank you. Yeah, we've got work to do every year. So sometimes people are saying the Innovation Week is looking bigger than the agency, and then that's fine. Because it's a young institution that we're building, sometimes we really have to expose and articulate. And that's why the Innovation Week is so important, to help people understand. But on an entire year, we do want to come and celebrate an entire year, at the end of the year rather. So we sort out the issues of policy, we are sorting out the issues of partnerships. We have a number of projects that we are working on. Classic example is that we've built a national innovation bridge. So this is the digital platform that enables innovators to actually load some of their solutions and in the process attract partners and funders. So on one side, it's like a digital marketplace, all right? So a classic example. Second, we're involved a lot in supporting institutions to build their commercialization systems. If you go to a university or a research center, Cambridge, Calro, ILRI, they create a lot of outputs, you know, products out of their research. But some of those don't find their way into the market, partly because the institutions are not structured to do commercial work, all right? And so we try to help them entire year. We do a lot of institutional support. We develop guidelines to help people. We evaluate some of the work they do. We work a lot with innovation hubs. We do a lot of coordination of innovation hubs to make sure they have best practices, you know, standard operating procedures, how do young innovators come in, how do they get capacitated, and how do they access funding, how do they access partners, and so on and so forth. So there's a lot of work we do in the course of the year, and then we celebrate it at the Innovation Week.
Okay. All right. So good thing we have a gentleman from academia, but perhaps if you're an innovator, because I've been told I could also be one. As long as you're solving a problem, not could be, I am. Thank you. I am an innovator. But if you have questions for these two gentlemen in studio with me at NTV Kenya, at O Burrows, we're all innovators. We all have the capacity to help find solutions. You know, you're at home and you're thinking this thing, if we do it like this, it could work much better. So do share your questions, do share your contribution using those two Twitter handles at NTV Kenya, at O Burrows. But Prof, Daktari here spoke about also working with academia so that the research you do at the university can be commercialized. So given you've been as part of the board since June, has it changed your outlook?
I think it has. Before I joined the board, I had the opportunity of having lunch with the ambassador for Israel. And during that period, he shared with me about the history of their country, gave me a book about the startup nation. I made the point that, you know, if you look at their country, everybody knows it's a desert, blah, blah, blah. It says one of the things that made them where they are is the place of innovation. In terms of generating ideas and taking those ideas to the marketplace. They are now a developed country, a world leader. And I think for me, the one thing that being as part of Kenya has helped me to appreciate much more is the need for us to be able to turn the many academic ideas that get generated on a day-to-day basis by students, by researchers, into products, into processes that can be able to add value to the country, commercially and also in terms of solving issues. So the conversations we've been having at the board is how do we ensure that we have postgraduate students. The University of Nairobi is graduating next week, and will graduate
on Friday, isn't it?
Yes, Friday next week. We'll graduate several thousand students. The question must then be those dissertations and theses that they write. What are the ideas in them, and how can those ideas move away from the graduation hall to the marketplace to be able to solve real problems? For example, you have a journalist who writes a thesis on how to be able to do things differently and in a much more interesting way. How does that find its way to make the work that you do at NTV much better? So it's, for me, it's not just about solving problems. It's about solving problems in a better way, in a much more cost-effective way. And that's the kind of conversation that we are seeking to have at Kenya. You asked Tony, what do you do across the entire year?
I did.
Tony told you many things. I think what we do on a day-to-day basis is to ensure that we are promoting the identification of innovative ideas, we are nurturing those innovative ideas, and we are upscaling those innovative ideas. That's all we do on a day-to-day basis.
Repeat that, nurturing?
We are identifying.
Identifying?
We are promoting them, we are nurturing them, and then we are translating them into solutions, into the marketplace. That's all we do on a day-to-day basis. So when Tony wakes up in the morning, all we want to hear from him, which innovative ideas have you helped to identify? And not in one place, in all the...
I was actually going to ask that. Do I now have to come to your offices? Because I went on your website and I identified where your offices are, but yeah.
Actually, that's the point. The point is Kenya is supposed to help promote an ecosystem. So it does not do everything on its own. Part of the reason why we are here is to speak to Kenyans, because the issue behind what we do is then to scout those ideas, to partner with people. So you partner with different agencies, you partner with universities. So we don't need to carry out research on our own. We don't need to have postgraduate students, but we need to work with the university to say, what ideas are coming out of your place? How can we support you? How can we work together to ensure that those ideas of students find their way into the market? And they find their way through many ways. They find their way through us linking students to industry, through internship. They find their way through us asking universities, can you also have technology transfer offices? Can you have IP offices so that there can be intellectual protection? Can you also have your own, before we have the Kenya National Innovation Week, can you have university-wide innovation weeks? I know, for example, the University of Nairobi had the Nairobi Innovation Week, sometimes in April. How does that then build into? So that's the first thing we do. The second is we then are able to work with industry, to ask industry, how can you be able to pick up the ideas that people have to be able to upscale, to be able to support? That's the second thing we do. The third thing we do, how do we have incubation hubs? You know, places where you go and experiment. You have crazy ideas, we like crazy ideas. because it's not the ideas that are conformist that make a change. It's those ideas that people look and say, what do you mean? This sounds crazy. That's what innovation is about. It's about new, it's about different. That's the one thing. The fourth thing that we do is to ask ourselves, how do we get startup funding? How do we get upscaling funding? How do we get private sector? How do we get development partners to come into the course? The one thing that we told Tony, it is very easy for every agency to say, you know, us, we want money from government. Government give us more money. That's the easy thing to do. As a state agency, yes, we require government funding, but innovation will not be upscaled by government. Government will provide a regulatory framework. Innovation will be upscaled by resources coming from you and I, by resources coming from corporate, because if we want to grow the economy, if we want to be innovative, we must also be able to ensure that the resources come from ourselves. If you look at across the times, people tell you, oh, you know, these donors are funding a lot of the things happening in this country. You don't ask yourself, why do they do so? They support innovative ideas because those innovative ideas help them to solve problems. So we must also start asking ourselves, if I put my money in these innovative ideas, what problem does it help me to solve? Let me give you my last example. During COVID, for a few days, everybody said, so how will we survive? I remember being here just a week before COVID. And after that, you couldn't come to the studio. But we then discovered, actually, you can do through Zoom. And that's for me what innovation is. How do you use adversity to be able to generate new ideas? And for us at Kenya, the issue is in every sector, from agriculture to business, to commerce, to manufacturing, to housing, we must be able to help generate new, innovative, cost-effective, and globally competitive ways of doing things, because Kenya is a global player.
Okay. And Daktari, yes. When Prof here talked about this is not something that is centralized. This is something that you're seeking. You also talked about the innovation hubs and all that. So we have young innovators, Kenyan innovators, who are celebrated globally. The other day there was a young lady from Mukuru with her clean stove, and she won some monies. So are there success stories that your agency can celebrate as well, that you took this innovator, right, from the incubator, put them together with a partner, and now they've commercialized their innovation? Yeah.
So there's a huge pool of innovations that have found their way to market because of our interventions. Now, you rightfully said is that we can't run an incubator ourselves. Then who will coordinate? There will be a bit of conflict of interest. In order to build a structure that is effective, our job is to make sure that there are as many incubation hubs as possible, there are many accelerators as possible, and there are funds out there. If you look at some of the reports on the funding that the Kenyan startups have received over the last 1 year, we are now number 4 in the entire of Africa. And the funding has gone to very many startups. Now, many times people think that, oh, so where is your name as a national agency in the attraction of that funding, all right? You may not find my name, or you may not find the agency's name, but what we did is to try and create an appropriate environment, increase the visibility of the startups, so that then the global audience of funders, venture capitalists and angel investors are able to connect with these guys. If you don't increase the visibility, then the discoverability of these guys, then they will not be probably connected. And now we're looking towards how do you become number 1 in terms of the funding that we are attracting. So there's a huge pool. Yesterday we released a report of the Kenya National Innovation Outlook. And one of the chapters we've covered there is on the startup progression. And given that now we are ranking number 4 in Africa on the number of startups that have attracted funding, the cumulative amount of funding, you'll notice a certain trend, all right? And now the question is, how do we move forward with that one? So the coordination mechanism that we now do is ensure that the incubation hubs are functional effectively, and that we are able to coordinate and track them across the country. Then we can aggregate this information and say, okay, so as a country, how are we looking? There's definitely a lot of room for improvement. And that's exactly why we're here, to try and make a better system for coordination, that then we may discover more and build a stronger pipeline and scale more. Now, I'm sometimes very deliberate not to mention individual startups, because sometimes it looks like you're promoting a particular startup.
One over the other.
One over the other, right? So I'm a little sensitive in that area. But then we've got a report. We release a report numerous number of startups. And because we don't work with them directly, our immediate client is not a startup. Our immediate client is a hub. Our immediate client is a university. Our immediate client is a research institution.
Okay.
And then you build the system that enables the pipeline to come out.
Ah, okay. So it's not your agency that sets up these hubs?
Yes, so now hubs may come from private sector.
Okay.
So a private entity may establish a hub. A university is expected, actually, if you asked me, to have a hub because you have a cosmopolitan environment there in an institution. And the institution is in itself an incubator of some sort.
Yes.
Students coming from all manner of places, faculty from all manner of places, there's an interaction of ideas and so forth. So academic institutions, research institutions set up innovation hubs. Development partners are setting up innovation hubs. Even other governments, Iranians, for example, set up a hub in Nairobi. Now the question is, how do we ensure the hubs are, first of all, recognized, they're operating properly? You know, sometimes they may not operate properly. They may exploit even innovators.
Yes.
Are we together? Look at a central bank. Look at the banks. So the interaction of the bank is with the consumers, right? The central bank, you never go to central bank as somebody wants to deposit money. But the central bank ensures that the system works, it's a fair playground, all right? And the institutions, which are the banks, operate in best practice, all right? Then you have a national financial system. Does that make sense? Classic analogy.
Yeah, thank you. That has actually explained a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you are central bank.
We are the central bank of innovation. Now, there you go. Yeah.
All right, so we need to take a break. But when we come back, you talked about protecting, you know, ensuring that these hubs are run in a way that the innovators are protected. And there's a question of proprietary, what is proprietary and who benefits at the end of the day from this innovation. And if I have, and Kenyans have lots of innovation. You see people saying they're, you know, building planes, and others are saying, you know, you can charge your phone, you know, riding a bike, and the innovations are numerous. Kenyans are innovative. I mean, look at M-Pesa. But so if I have such an innovation, must I go through a hub, or can I take my bicycle, ride it to your offices and say, I have this thing here? All right, we come back with more on the other side of this break. Welcome back to AM Live. With me in studio, I have Professor Collins Odote, who's board member of the Kenya National Innovation Agency. We're also joined by Dr. Tony Omwansa, CEO of the agency. So okay, so I think the question was to you, right? Before we took the break. Okay, so how, first of all, do we protect, because you raised this, how do we protect these, or how do you seek to protect the innovators in these hubs?
Okay, so there's a national system for protection in the issues of intellectual property, and that's why we have an agency called KIPI, those who have not heard about it. So they basically concentrate on protection. They have the mandate for the actual protection. We also have the Kenya Copyright Board. They also deal with copyright issues, all right? Now, we build the national innovation system. And that simply means once we start with the identification, support the identification mechanism. Now remember, we also can't go all over the place fishing them. We create a system that can enable the identification to happen. And that's why we work with various institutions like universities and so forth. Then the protection needs to happen, all right? Now, we are taking sure that the pipe is happening. So at that institutional level, there should be an intellectual property office. Are we together? So if I go to University of Nairobi, there is the IP management office. So the innovator goes to that IP management office. They have a process of ensuring they are able to identify the intellectual property and do all the linking to a KIPI. Are we together? So my job is to make sure that that process is happening. Does the institution have the IP management policy? All right. Does it have a process? Is it the process operating? Is there capacity building that needs to happen, and so on and so forth? Now look at the same way into the incubation hubs. This is where the nurturing of this idea is supposed to happen. One of the preconditions would be, not always though, would be the innovation that you are trying to develop into an enterprise is it protected? Is the innovator well capacitated to understand, right, that their IP needs to be protected? And if so, then move forward. You see those standard operating procedures? Because if we don't do that, then everybody does what they think would be convenient. So it's our job to try and make sure that that process happens. Now, one of the challenges I have with universities, now let me look at Professor Odote as a professor, not as my board member. But even as a board member, he will now relate then with the issues I'm dealing with. As an institution of higher learning in particular, as far as I'm concerned, understanding intellectual property should be a requirement for students. Because many a times we say, oh, young man lost his idea. And I keep asking myself, who do we blame? Is it the young man, or is the person who was supposed to help the young man know, or woman know, how the intellectual property was to be protected, even the identification of that intellectual property by itself? So one of the push that we have is that the capacity for the student or the young person to know that they have intellectual property and it can be protected is the responsibility of the institution that is supporting that person, all right? So that then we embed this as part of our curriculum, part of our training, part of our pedagogy and mindset. If you go to China, at elementary level, students will tell you, young kids, there's something called intellectual property. So it's in the bloodstream as they move up the value chain. And they are looking for ideas and testing them and then ensuring they're protected. So I think I've articulated the role of the institutions that protect, the role of the institutions that help in the identification and the education, and then pipe it to the protection institutions.
Olive, can I just add one thing?
Yes, yes, please.
You see, the only problem is that Tony speaks as if intellectual property only happens at universities.
Yeah.
But remember, innovation happens both in formal and informal spaces.
Yes.
You can go to the village and somebody has an interesting idea. I think our responsibility as Kenya is to ensure, and I think you alluded to that, is to ensure that the idea behind intellectual property is embedded into our own idea about innovation. You know, for several years recently, you've heard that people are being taught about financial literacy skills. That because you can get money, you need to be taught, even in terms of young people, that as you give them money, even as we talk about the Hustlers Fund, you're also telling people, how do you manage your finances? What Kenya is seeking to do is to ensure that people also are given basic IP management skills, so that you know, by the way, as I'm thinking about my idea, there are several things that are important. Number one, the idea itself. Number two, the resources required to be able to upscale that idea. Number three, the market where we'll take that idea. But number four is the protection of that idea, because there are many instances where young people have developed ideas. The next time you wake up, somebody else has protected it. I think we've had interesting conversation in this country about the Kiondo. Where you oh, it's been protected by country X. I think our responsibility is to ensure that as part of the process of incubation, both in formal spaces, University of Estonia said, but also in informal spaces, whether it's young kids in primary school, whether it's secondaries, whether it's the Juakali sector, we are telling people and showing that, by the way, intellectual property protection is critical. And number two, here is the easy way of having that protection, so that you don't need to look for a lawyer. You don't need to wait until you come to KIPI in Nairobi. There's facilitation that enables you to link up with the process of protection. That's our job and our responsibility.
All right. And what necessitated? Why was it? Because when we're speaking off camera, Daktari, you were telling me that your agency is only 2 years old. So what necessitated its establishment?
Well, first of all, let's say the creation of the institution and the policy and the national instruments for the institution was started off around 2013. So we actually established by an Act of Parliament of 2013. But the operationalization of the institution took time. Factors that are beyond my understanding as to why that took a while. But I was signed up as a CEO, as a first substantive CEO in 2020. The foundation of it is people realized, the government realized that, yes, there's a lot of output from research, from individuals in the public, and they may not necessarily know how to manage these ideas. Innovation hubs were beginning to pop up a little bit, and then researchers were recognizing that a lot of our output doesn't seem to find its way to commercial value. You just find some prototypes in different places. And there was need for creating new jobs and thinking about the future. How do you create amazing new innovative solutions? How do you manage that entire process? So it became necessary to build the National Innovation Agency. The development of the agency came out of a process of creating 3 institutions together. So there is for factors that really know until we fully became operational. Now there is a board, there is a management, there are instruments of running that organization. Yeah, there are areas of improvement, but at least we've got the institution up and running.
Up and running.
Yeah.
Okay, so I was listening to Prof. Odote when he was talking about how, for example, when people are graduating, you know, their dissertations and their thesis and all that, and he gave the example of a journalist and perhaps improvements contained in their paper that we could implement here, for example, at Nation Media Group. So this isn't about robots. Like if I come to Sarit Center, because you talked about exhibitions, is it just those who with scientific inclination in the area of, for example, AI that I'll find there? Because I feel like I might be a little bit out of my depth. Prof?
Innovations is about robots, but not robots only. we innovate in all spaces, in every particular sector. That's why I gave you the example of journalists, which is close to you. I think in every place that you, when we train students, postgraduate students, we train them in all disciplines. Science, technology is critical because that's the future of the world. But innovation is not just in terms of science and technology. It's terms also in social spaces. You will generate, if you look at the spectrum of things we have, really one of the things we are being told is about traditional knowledge. How our people even used to treat people in terms of the medical sector. That's an innovation. You can have innovation in terms of culture, some cultural practice. That then becomes an innovation. So it is, you will not just find, it's not just about the engineering people. It's not just about the technology. It is in all the different things. It's your journalists, it's your political scientists in terms of designing a new way. It's your agricultural person in terms of how we solve the challenges of food security. It's your environmentalist in terms of climate change. It is your lawyer in terms of new ways of doing business. It's your business person. It's your engineer. It's your physicist. So it's in all the spaces. And that's why we speak about what are the innovative ways across the entire spectrum. So yes, robots and technology is critical, but not the only one. Let me just add one other thing to what you asked. So why was Kenya established?
Yes.
And I think the critical issue it was established, you know, for a long time, we have known that you grow wealth through agriculture and you grow wealth through physical infrastructure. As you grow up, you know, I will go and buy a flat, I will buy some land, even if I don't farm it. That's the traditional way of growing wealth. The world is moved to the industrial and knowledge economy. That's the future of the world. You hear conversation about the digital economy. We're moving from tangible to intangible assets. That's what we need to develop. That's what we need to commercialize. A lot of the world that is more developed are not developed from physical buildings. They're not developed from land. They're developed from ideas, and ideas are turned into money. So our duty as Kenya, and the reason why the science, technology, and innovation ecosystem was established, is that Kenya, as part of its playing in the big league, as part of achieving Vision 2030, we need to tap onto the creative minds of our citizens. We need to tap onto the athletic minds of our sports people. We need to tap onto the innovative worlds of our cultural people, but not just tap into it. We need to ensure that we're not just celebrating people who run well. We are turning that running into money. We're not just celebrating nice footballers who play. We are ensuring that our footballers are becoming professional, being paid. We're not just celebrating when you see science congresses. Oh, I've seen some young man in Kiambu trying to develop some plane. We're not just smiling about them, but they're trying. We're ensuring those things actually become real, and they don't just become real, they're turned into money. So that we can be able to grow our economy. We can create new jobs. The future of work is not physical employment. The future of work is self-employment and employment creation through the digital economy. That's the responsibility of what Kenya sees, and that's why commercialization is so dear to us.
Okay, and it's part of the motive behind the Kenya Innovation Week to allow us to see what is possible. And you said you have like 3,000 delegates, so this is something I would have had to register for? Or can I go pay a fee and come in and see what's on display?
Yeah, well, actually, even before I answer that question, we've got a very simple definition of innovation at the agency level. We call it change that adds value. And that's why I said you're an innovator as well. Change that adds value.
That adds value.
In other words, any sector, any discipline, as long as you can move something from point A to point B, from the way it was and into a new way it can be. For example, the way you do your media work, and in the course of that time, you've created new value, or you've solved a certain pain of someone, right? And now people want to consume. That's your innovative, all right? So come to the Kenya Innovation Week, where the head of state yesterday officially opened it, which is a demonstration of the commitment of government towards innovation. You know, we have to be a little orderly. Otherwise, anybody and everybody just walks in and then causes trouble. All right? So people register. So we're on the website. We've got the KenyaInnovationWeek.com, and people sign up. And we have invited people to make a little payment because somebody has to buy lunch there. All right? It's going to cost us a little bit. But we've got partners who have also come in to kind of subsidize that whole process. So it is important so that that way we're able to track. Then we also have an online presence, you know, so we are streaming things online. So you go to our YouTube channel, everything that is happening in there, including when the head of state came, all the remarks he made, you're able to interact. That way we're giving somebody outside, who out of Nairobi, maybe in the village, to actually participate through the process. So those are the two ways. Exhibitors also register. We need to know, you know, like you have something to show, right? So sign up and let's get to know what you're working on, and then we give you the mechanism of doing that. Now, the momentum is also building all the way to the 12th. Now, we have Jamhuri Day, and the head of state will be speaking there. So part of why he came yesterday was to kick off a week-long celebration of innovation. You know, over time, our national forums have been a little bit historic. So if you celebrate your independence out of colonization, you also need to realize you may be colonized with poverty.
Yes.
All right? And you may be colonized with disease. You may be colonized with modern challenges. And how do you overcome them? Through innovation. So the head of state was very clear. He said, look, let's focus on innovation as a way of overcoming our national challenges and celebrate the mechanisms of taking us into the future. So everybody gets an opportunity that way. And the younger people will even participate at the Jamhuri Day as he has guided.
Okay.
Yeah.
So how has the digital economy transformed the innovation game? I mean, like for us in media, now everybody with a phone
Yes.
Can go online and communicate directly to their audience. They don't need a gatekeeper. So this innovation, now people are getting ideas even from the internet. Like you can probably find anything on YouTube. So how has the digital economy impacted innovation?
Oh, I'm actually surprised you can ask that question. You know, hugely. I think several things. Number one is that in terms of innovations, we now know that you are not innovating for Asumbi, which is my village. You are innovating for the world space. Because by just the technology, whatever you do here is able to be seen across the entire globe. Tony was just telling you, when you ask him, can I go to Sarit Center? And he gave you many answers. The answer is yes, you can, because that's why it's at an exhibition. But you don't have to go to Sarit Center. Sarit Center can come to you. So if you are in Garissa, you're able to attach it. That's the first thing in terms of the innovation. But the second is that it's shown us that, look, through the power of technology, you can be able to know how to generate new ideas. Before COVID, for example, everybody said, you know, Kenya is a cash economy. You cannot be a cashless economy. You would go abroad, you find. Now, even the mama mboga in your village, somebody asks you, boss, you help me with money, you must struggle whether you're carrying cash or not.
Yes.
Because of the power of M-Pesa. Thirdly, because of the digital economy, you are able to get ideas and information that will be much more expensive to get. Today, you can teach yourself how to do anything on YouTube. Anything on YouTube. The fourth is you now know that if you think about innovative ideas, one of the things you must factor is technology. You must factor it. Whatever ideas you come in, one of the ways of scaling it up is how am I using the power of technology? Because technology will do several things. Number one, it will reduce the cost of marketing. You don't have to put physical billboards everywhere to market to people. You will do online advertising and life will be busy. But number two, it will give you access to easy information. You don't have to come to a university. You don't have to come to a TVET institution to get basic information. You can get it through online press. But number three, it enhances your market. Today, when you develop a new idea, as part of commercialization, you are able to sell. I know of so many people who, when you ask them, so what work are you doing? I'm working in the digital space. The guys who will be up at midnight here in Kenya, because they're trading with their colleagues in the developed world. In the morning, as you and I are walking to come to the studio, come to work, they're asleep. So I think for me, the digital economy has changed the manner in which we innovate. It has made it easy to upscale, but it has also opened us to the digital superhighway. We have access to huge amounts of information that properly utilized, we are able to then grow in leaps and bounds.
Okay. And have we properly positioned ourselves that we are able to leverage on this?
That's a good one. Probably even before before answered, you know, in addition to what Professor is saying, we're trying also to help people to see that technology is not the innovation. It's the means, it's a tool that can enable you to innovate. So sometimes we get a little mixed up that, hey, you know what, because I can either interact with the technology, you know, I've got all this sophistication and, you know, and so on and so forth, then I've innovated, or that's the innovation. No, it's a means to something. And the more we do that, then we see ourselves not looking at as ICT as the end, just because I'm sophisticated, but rather how can I exploit, in the level of our national maturity, how do I exploit the technology to enable me create a lot more possibilities for myself? That's very, very valuable in our engagement with the ecosystem. How well we have exploited, you know, you can't get up to 100% yet, all right? You know, there's a ranking mechanism that helps evaluate countries and the people and society in terms of how are we maturing as a society in utilizing technology and, you know, digital systems to you know, to scale and translate to better lives of people. Remember, at the end of all this, it's not how sophisticated you and I look. Is whether the quality of life has improved. When you look at the Vision 2030, it's about the quality of life. What is going to be in my pocket? You know, how will society interact with one another? And that's what we are aiming at, all right? And then we use all this. The second thing I'll observe on that note is that the head of state is very clear in the way he has organized his government. The Ministry of ICT now is called Ministry of ICT and the Digital Economy. It's deliberate so that you see technology as something towards something. And there's a State Department with a PS specifically with these issues of digital economy. That will include capacity building of people, helping people to realize that you can do a lot more, increase access, you know, to technology. I mean, if you go to a city like Tel Aviv, internet is accessible to anyone in the street for free, all right? When you give that possibility, you find people seated in a Java, and you had the governor also in Nairobi seriously considering it. People are seated in a restaurant somewhere, and they're just interacting. And ideas sometimes is about how easily they commingle. If I am now interacting with somebody from Silicon Valley, just like by sitting in my small village, I have some young people in my village who actually run online businesses just by connecting to the internet. And by the way, they earn more than many people I know in the city. And they don't pay rent because they are still living in their village,
Yes.
right? And they don't even drive around. They're seated, and the guy is having a very good life. I'm like, really? So what the hell am I doing in the city? You see, you're decentralizing that way, right? So the optimization of our use starts with access, all right? And then the know-how, and then exposure, which then helps you to build a better quality of life because you accessed, you connected, and you developed and scale. And by the way, there are people who are scaling ideas without necessarily coming to an incubation center and so on and so forth. Why? Because they interacted with the digital platform. They even get online incubators. They access online funders. They access accelerators, virtual. They get trained, they get enabled, and grow.
All right. So I have this idea, Prof, right? And I go to an incubation hub. And many people contribute to make it better because that is what I imagine happens. Iron sharpens iron. Does it remain my idea?
An interesting question, and I think an important one. Number one, you are the innovator. The idea is yours. But number two, the reason why intellectual property laws are then important is because not properly dealt with, it is fairly possible for Tony then to appropriate those ideas as yours. And part of the capacity building that gets to develop part of the ecosystem is to ensure that as we support innovators, the contributions of the other people are acknowledged, but the ideas remain with the person who has developed it. I think one of the critical conversations has even been in universities, is that when you have a document being developed at the university, whose idea is it? I am doing something at the university, it's part of the university time, is that university's idea or mine? I think if you don't have an effective infrastructure, an effective system of nurturing that talent and ensuring people are recognized appropriately. Then somebody says, I don't want to innovate because somebody else will benefit. So developing an appropriate ecosystem which ensures that if I do this, if for example you develop something here as part of your work as NTV, ensuring that both you who developed the idea and the institution that provided you with the framework that has that idea developed is appropriately acknowledged in a useful balance is the critical thing. And I think for me that's what IP, that's what the ecosystem develops, so that yes, the idea is yours, but in addition, these people who helped you also had a role to play in the development.
Okay. All right. As part of the honchos who graced the opening of the Kenya Innovation Week, we also saw the Commonwealth Secretary General. And you know, when, oops, I beg your pardon, but when a professor here was talking about reading a certain book on the startup economy that was gifted to him, and he talked of Israel. Is this something that cuts across Kenya's borders? I know some of the borders have been done away again because of the digital economy.
Thank you very much for that. I mean, you've pointed to issues, the presence of the Secretary General of the Commonwealth Secretariat. You've also pointed to the issue of Startup Nation Israel. I got a chance to actually visit Israel and interrogate a while back and read the book, The Startup Nation. You see, one of the things that I saw in Israel, for example, is that they build for the world. So when you're innovating, you're told, look, you're not, the population of Israel is probably somewhere around 7, maximum, I would think 8 million or thereabout, right? Now, why would you say they're so innovative, and why do we have all the tech companies and a lot of innovation happening there? Is because they build for the world, all right? So you don't think you're building for your city, your county, and the friends you have around. You're building for the globe. So that's one thing that really, really helps in terms of the mindset. And that's why our campaign around skills, awareness, as well as technology is part and parcel of the national innovation system. You've got to diffuse this to people as much as possible. So that's one dimension. And we are hoping, and we did actually articulate when the president came and he committed to this, that we're going to be launching the 10-year Innovation Master Plan, support developed and driven by Kenya. Because you have to really define a destination with modest clarity. And you have to understand that a destination of the country at that point in time is going to take several things. You know, skills, technology, you know. So you have to have certain targets around that. Second is that it has to be multi-ministerial and multidisciplinary approach. Not that, you know, one track, the agriculture are just busy thinking agriculture, and the education people are busy thinking education. But they've got to embed innovation across this, and we know that as a country, 10 years from now, this is exactly where we want to be in terms of the amount of foreign direct investment, funding for startups, the solutions we will have created in society, how many scalable enterprises. We talk a lot about M-Pesa. So how many more M-Pesa kind of initiatives can we have? But we have to direct that energy. So let me talk about the Commonwealth Secretariat. You know, we realized, I have attended a forum in Finland, for example, called Slash. Slash on an annual basis attracts 19,000 or so people to attend the event, the national event. And that attracts a lot of people from, you know, other countries to either come consumer product, they come to invest in a startup, they are coming to see what the globe is going about. So the Secretary General came and, look, he helped us, she helped us rather to see, you know, what is possible outside. There are many tools that the Commonwealth Secretariat has built for that the country can adopt, all right, and we can share with one another. They have an innovation fund, they've got an innovation challenge, and so on and so forth. And she articulated, and she kind of gave inspiration. Now, well, what came out of that engagement is that next year, we would like to host the Commonwealth Innovation Week. Why? Because you want to attract other partners to come on board because they become an inspiration to you. Sometimes a young person just thinks their world is this world. Then you're like, oh, this can actually work in Rwanda. It can work in Congo. We hope to host 5 presidents in next year's Innovation Week as a way of inspiration. So you get an opportunity to springboard your thing to another country. And for example, here we've got South Africa, here we've got the UK, and there's a lot of cross engagement that is happening. So you get inspired about how you can take your thing to the other country, and you get inspired by what is happening in that country. That interaction has to happen so that the Innovation Week and innovation is just not a local way of thinking, it's a global way of thinking, but you're acting locally. There are people who are exploiting technology much better than we are doing. And so there's an opportunity to learn from one another and also create markets for one another. We tried to get some South African startups here, some Finnish startups here, Estonian startups here, and and we are looking how do we springboard others also to those kind of markets. So it's very deliberate, but you have to build a relationship that enables us to work, and that's Innovation Week for you, and that's the Secretary General for you.
Okay, and Prof, my question to you would be this: there's a lot of disruption happening in a lot of industries. For example, the media industry, you read, it's not just in Kenya where there are layoffs. BBC, CNN are doing the same thing. And even in the tea sector, there was hesitance to the adoption of machines. This disruption has caused a lot of fear. How do we move past the fear and the feeling of being paralyzed, right? Like, I don't know what to do next, to seeing the opportunities?
Thanks. I think three quick things. The first one is just to make the point, in addition to what Tony has said, in terms of where we'd like to go. If you look at our current assessment, we are at number 88 globally in terms of our innovation levels. Our vision is that over the next few years, we should go to the top 50. And that requires that we address some of the things you've asked us. And some of the things you've asked us, I think the day before yesterday, when I was watching some of the layoffs happening here, one of the things that it was sad, people were losing jobs, but at the same time you are reading a statement about, but a lot of the journalists are now able to actually attract much more audience on their online YouTube. That's a statement from yourself. What does that tell you? The opportunities that exist. So I think what we should start doing as a nation much more is to prepare all our citizens into asking ourselves, so what's the future of employment? How do I take advantage of that future? The future of employment is only, even for you, is not sitting where you are. The future of employment is not sitting to be employed by NTV. The future of employment is not me sitting to be teaching at the University of Nairobi. The future is creating jobs, and innovation ensures that you are able to use your talents, as opposed to now waiting that I am being laid off, as opposed to the complaint about, oh, machines are taking over our work. Is to recognize, I think Tony made the point, is to recognize that innovation is not technology. Technology is a facilitator. Innovation is your mind, and that mind cannot be taken away from you. The thing that we must then do is to deploy our mind much more into solving the challenges facing the world. And those challenges become more and more every day. Become more, and so when people get laid off, the question we should be asking ourselves, if I was an innovator, I need to be much more. The question we should be asking ourselves, by the way, I can see a lot of journalists being laid off. What's the business opportunity? I can see a lot of climate change happening. What's the business opportunity? I can see a lot of fights in Kericho about whether to introduce machines or not in terms of tea. What's the business opportunity? There was a book that I think all of us are told to read, Who Moved My Cheese? You know that book?
Yes.
Please read it and ask everybody to read it. Because if you stay in the same idea, you'll wake up and find the world has changed. Then you're saying, who moved my cheese? The idea behind innovators is to continuously move cheese. You must move people's cheese. So when you see any opportunity for disruption, any challenge, that becomes an opportunity for you. A few days ago, as you know, I'm involved in the Presidential Working Party in Education Reform. So a few days ago, there was a media coverage. And the media coverage was about this private developer who was saying, when I heard about junior secondary, I started constructing a new, that's what innovation is about, that you are always scouting for ideas and you're ahead of, by the way, how can I find solutions for it? So if there are no problems, an innovator is in trouble. Because your duty every day is to provide better solutions to problems. So I think as opposed to us going to the warrior culture, we must always go to the culture of how do I solve it. My last point about that, COVID came 2 years ago. COVID made billionaires. Forget our billionaires here. Across the globe, people who developed the vaccine, they didn't know COVID was coming, but through COVID they developed vaccines, people who developed ventilators. So you see, while all of us were looking at the challenge as to how COVID is disrupting our business, other people were looking at the opportunity. So for me, I think our collective responsibility, and that's why I am happy. Several months ago, I complained that the challenge we have in innovation is lack of political will. I am happy that no less than the president yesterday was in 2 events. He was at the Kenya Innovation Week and he was at Kabete Polytechnic, and each of them is about providing political will to innovation, because then when there is government facilitation, then ideas can flourish, because you know you will not be clamped down, you will not be told what are you doing. So I think for me the challenge for us as a country, the challenge for all of us, yourself, myself, and each of us working in this space, is to ensure that we take advantage of every challenges we find in society and provide solutions for them. So as opposed to all of us, and a challenge for me, as we teach students, we must start teaching students not to be only looking to be employed at NTV and complaining when they are
laid off.
To think, but also for businesses to start recognizing that, by the way, it is when the economy is not doing well, we have a responsibility to facilitate innovation, so that when today Olive is leaving, we're not saying that we are sacking Olive. What have we done to facilitate her innovative ideas so that we can partner with her? Because you will always be, Olive, a journalist.
All right.
Whether you are here or out, and the media will always need you. So how do we partner with you in terms of generating your ideas and upscaling those ideas?
I love that. And the last word, Daktari, Prof said, you said you were number 4 in Africa, right? Prof, you said we're number 80 on the globe? 80? 88. Do we have the potential to become number 1?
Absolutely. Now you probably see why coordinating the innovation system is a lot more complicated than just supporting one startup. Let's link it to the education system. The more you build the pedagogy, the way of learning that helps people to become critical thinkers, observing for opportunities. So learning becomes a different way. It's just trying to exploit the potential that there is in a person to be able to identify problems and create solutions. And that's why the teaching and learning is also becoming different. We are evolving it, so that then we adapt to the challenges that we have. Second point I'll observe is what the head of state yesterday said in his remarks, that we're working on a startup bill. And he committed himself that I will ensure that this bill comes to pass and becomes law. And the Kenya National Innovation Agency will run a fund, an innovation fund. It was his statement. He wants to see a startup fund, so that then we support the startups through the incubation hubs, because we can't do that directly. Rather, it will be too much for us. And so that's the head of state making a statement. That is a political will that we are talking about. Now, we did also commit to the president, and he actually tasks the innovation agency, that I'd like us to see over the next couple of years move that number 88 to top 50. You see, you work on a certain set of indicators that then help you to see that you're moving. And we are committed ourselves. The board is very, very interested. We are working on a new strategic plan for the next 5 years. But then we pin all these things together so that then the country can, improve its ranking. And like I said, this ranking is not just a number for the sake of it. It translates to the quality of lives of people. End of the story. Okay. We shall be number 1 in Africa. That I promise you in the near future.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. Professor Odote Collins, board member, Kenya National Innovation Agency, and we've also been joined by the CEO, Dr. Tony Omwansa. You can rewatch this interview. You can find it on our YouTube channel, NTV Kenya. And just search Kenya Innovation Week 2022. You will find the Twitter handle. You will find the website. The learning process, they say, is never ending. That's it for AM Live. I make way for your world, and they're focused on the KUSI, because you talked about climate change, Prof, and solutions. So this is about African-grown, homegrown solutions to climate change. Zainab Wandati coming up next.